Hey everybody, as you can tell, it's been raining, but the sun is out now, so I'm running out to do some errands, but also to rant to, complain about tax. I'm not actually going to complain about paying tax. I'm not going to complain about who is and isn't paying tax and what they're paying, etc. I'm not going down that political route. I'm talking about the sheer simplicities of being self-employed in the UK. If you're not self-employed, you may not be aware of the fact that you have to basically record all of your accounts, and once a year you have to report on your profit and loss and all those sorts of things, which is fine. That's no problem at all. You know, that's not the difficult part. And once you get to know your tax return, doing your tax return isn't too difficult. It gets more complicated, particularly if you have a slightly more complex job, like if you're a YouTuber and Trump gets in power and then starts taking money from you. Basically, the Americans tax me 30% of my earnings from America, which is separated from what I earn from the UK views, it would seem. But then what I can do when I do my tax return is I basically tell the UK HMRC about it, and they will deduct that from what I owe, so I get the money back. And that's great and fine once you understand how that works, but trying to find that out is a nightmare. The HMRC website is, it's full of information apparently, but it is really difficult to actually learn anything from. And the reason I say that is every time I call HMRC for a query, they just go to the documents and just start reading them off the document. I'm like, no, I really like to speak to someone who actually knows what they're talking about, because this is going to get slightly complex. A couple of years ago, I got given the phone number of the technicians of HMRC. Now, these people actually know everything. You can ask them, they just know it. They're like the geniuses, as it were. And when I tried to call them this year to ask them a question, they changed departments and they don't offer like a public service now unless you go through the normal agent. So you call the normal agent, you ask them a question, you're like, I know I'm going to need to speak to a technician, and they're like, I don't think you will. And then you say, yeah, I've got this form from the IRS about American tax, and I need to include this into my foreign earnings. And do I need to use the long form when I'm using a foreign earnings reporting? Or can I do that in conjunction with the short form? And they're just like, yeah, I'll get you a technician. By the way, that's all true stuff I've had to learn. And it's worrying, because if you make a mistake, you can get fined quite badly for it. And I know some people say, well, you just get an accountant for that. Well, I can't afford an accountant. And I'm also not going to pay an accountant money to do something that I can do myself. I just have to learn it. But the point I'm trying to make with this video is the system is just way too complicated. The forms you have, as I say, if you know the boxes you fill in, fine. But what you actually end up doing with those forms is you just go a couple of bits here, a couple of bits there, tick there, and some numbers, and you're done. But when you're new and you don't know, you're looking like a 7-page form with 1,000 tick boxes asking you stuff you've got no idea what it means. And if you ask the HMRC, they're like, well, have you read the instructions with it? I'm like, yes. Have you? And then they're like, well, I am about to try and answer your question. And then they're like, I don't know, and they get a technician. They don't even understand their own system. I'm also dyslexic, but thankfully I persevere enough that I actually get the information in and I learn it. The best way I learn things is by talking to people. It's one of the reasons I've got good information retention, I've realised, because I learn things much quicker by seeing and doing than reading, and if someone explains it to me, then that locks in. That information is there forever, basically. But yeah, my basic point is, if the UK is to grow, if people are going to have opportunities come up for people to make their own businesses, to manufacture, to produce in the UK and bring money into the UK, it shouldn't be such a hurdle for learning how to do the tax. Because for a lot of people, it will stop them. Because I'm sure there's some people like, oh, I would like to do a little business of my own, but I have no idea where to start with the tax side of it, and it's so much so that I'm just not going to get involved. I can tell you now, if you want to start a little business, becoming self-employed and doing your return is easy. It's very, very easy. It only really comes down to 2 numbers. Total money made and total money spent out. That's it. But you do need to know all the other bits and pieces. But I still feel like it needs to be a more simple system. And I think it needs to be taught in schools. Like a lot of things, like actually prepare kids for the world. That's been one of the hardest things, really, as I grew up, was that when I got to, working and things like that, okay, well, working is easy because you go to work and they sort out your tax. The worst thing you have to do is, sort out P45s in between, and you get the odd P60, and stuff like that. It's not a lot to it. Obviously, kids need to be taught reading and writing and maths. They should be taught some history, some social stuff, That's all important. But I really feel like the curriculum should involve, like, in the future you will own a house. Oh, sorry, actually, correction of the time that we're in the future, you will not have a chance in hell of owning a house. You'll be earning 7p a week. The houses will cost 5 billion. Bread will be £50 a loaf. No, not quite, but it kind of feels that way. I was born in 85, and from my understanding, yeah, not in the best situation, my generation, for stuff, and I'm not saying that it's the fault of other generations or anything like that, just the way the cards fell. You know, when my mum and dad bought their first house, the cost of the house was a few years of my dad's salary. I think the house cost £5,000. Now the amount of years' salary required to buy a house is just so much higher. It just seems insurmountable. And, you know, the cost of renting's getting even worse because the cost of buying houses is getting worse, and people are still wanting to make profits on that, so they're still buying houses and then passing that cost on to the people who want to rent it, which is it's not an ideal situation. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Have they, in more recent years, you know, started teaching kids in school stuff about tax and council tax and the things you pay for, like amenities, and just, you know, generally explaining how you run a house or a flat or whatever? Do they do that? If you enjoy the video, hit the like button. Huge thanks to my Patreon supporters, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.